All right, so as I mentioned in the welcome, today begins the season of Advent, and our series calls the night or the dawn is coming. So, what we realize is that Advent is not Christmas. So the two seasons are different, especially like in the church. Outside of the church, people don't recognize this other than it's Christmas season. And so we say, yes, it feels like Christmas, but we actually in the church look at Advent as at that time as we prepare for Christmas. So a Christmas season begins December 24th and extends all the way through January 6th. And that's when Epiphany takes over, and that's kind of the church seasons, and that's pretty much what we'll talk about there. But Advent means that there's a season before the coming, right? And this is why we talk about the dawn that is coming. So today we're going to talk about when the night feels long, and that's the topic. So Advent doesn't start with sleigh bells and twinkling lights. Advent actually begins in darkness. And so this is both, yes, metaphorical, but also very real, because when you look at the season that we find ourselves in, it's actually when light is less. Right? In December 21st is the longest night of the year. And it's that for a reason. It means that the sun comes up and it goes down and there's very little sunlight. And so when we look at this season, even winter, we're looking at this very kind of dark part of the season of the year. But we also talk about when we're looking at in the Advent time, we're saying this is the time before Jesus first came. And so it's in that season that people were waiting. And it's a lot of waiting. When you look at the first time that God promised to send somebody, it was like thousands of years. And this, when we even have this word today, we're going to first look at from Isaiah, this is 700 years before Jesus would even be born. So we're looking at all of these pieces and like the Advent and the darkness that's kind of looming over it all. Like this is where Advent starts, is in the darkness. We know about darkness. And we know a very metaphorical darkness that surrounds us, whether it's these wars or even rumors of wars. There's loneliness. And loneliness can be an epidemic because loneliness leads people to just think their own thoughts to themselves. It leads people to be able to say, I need to just be strong in me. And that's a hard place to do it. It's a hard place to be when you're trying to just do life alone. But we also see fractured relationships within families and friendships. And we see political divisions as well. But here's the good part about this, is that God meets us in the dark. God doesn't say, well, once you reach the edge of the light, then that's where I'll be. You see, God was not absent from them. Many times when we look at this moment, we talk about the intertestamental times. We see Malachi, the last prophet in the Old Testament, and then we go 400 years in the middle of like this last prophet until Jesus comes and is born. We look at this 400 years and people call it that God was silent. And here's the thing about it, is that did God have a prophet? No. God didn't have another prophet that was writing or whatever it might have been. But was God absent from the world? Did he just say, hey, I'm going to take 400 years off, guys, like I'm kind of tired? No, God doesn't take time off. God's not like us. And so in the midst of that, God's still saying he's present. God was still speaking to people. God wasn't silent. God wasn't absent. God met them in the midst of the darkness. So that's what we're going to look at here. We got the first part. We got two passages that we're going to be looking at this, one from Isaiah, and then we're going to go to the New Testament later from the passage that was just read. But let's start with Isaiah chapter 9. Let's look at verse 1, and really what we're going to look at is the very beginning. Well, let's just go through it. Nevertheless, the time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. The land of Zebulun, Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. So, we talked about it knowing darkness. Well, here's the thing. Israel knew darkness as well. They knew what deep darkness felt like. When you look at this, and there's so many great passages throughout the Old Testament, when we go back to Exodus, right, and what led the people to be able to even be drawn out of that land, they first had to go through what we call the plagues, right, and they had a whole bunch of plagues, and one of them was darkness. And so it's one of those darkness that, I love how the Hebrew describes this darkness. It talks about it as a deep, deep darkness. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a deep, deep darkness before, but it's one of those ones that you're holding your hand up in front of your face and you still can't see it. You see, this deep, deep darkness is something that I think that they wanted us to be able to feel. It's that kind of darkness that is all of a sudden, it's just surrounding you. You see, that's the darkness that we actually see in Isaiah. When he talks about in 60, when he's talking about this light that's coming, he's saying, you who lived in this deep, deep darkness, a light is going to dawn. You see, they knew about darkness in that very similar way, but he also knew about it metaphorically, right? The struggles were real all throughout the Old Testament. We look at exiles that are always happening. Two major exiles of the people of God, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they both were exiled. We know about famines all the way from Genesis to the end, right? We're seeing famines occur across that land. It was everything dried out. There was nothing that was producing. We knew about these internal political struggles when we start the whole thing with the kings, and we see the first king, Saul, and he's got a struggle with David, and then David eventually takes over, and then there's another struggle when it's like Solomon's going to come. And then after Solomon dies, then there's this battle which divides the kingdoms one from another, all because of this internal struggle of theirs. It causes divisions, it causes strife, it causes hatred, all within the same families. And so there, when we think about these struggles, when we actually connect these pieces, we're saying these are the same struggles, just in a different form. We have the same kind of struggles that are going on, personal and cultural struggles, that we're looking through the darkness and we're trying to find our way. That's why we say God is not afraid of the dark. VeggieTales had a song, God is bigger than the boogeyman, right? And the boogeyman usually exists in the dark. Right, there we go. So, if you don't know that song, just YouTube it. I'm sure it's on there too. But here's the thing. God's not afraid of the dark, and that's the reason why when we talk about Advent and God starting in the dark, God's not afraid of existing there. It's sometimes in the dark, though, we can't see God. And just because we can't see God doesn't mean that God isn't there. So darkness. So God does some good work in the dark. When we go back to creation, and it says even God was speaking things into existence even before he brought about light. He's saying there was this moment that in the darkness God speaks and things happen. We see Exodus that I referred to before. When Exodus, there was darkness, and there was that darkness even before they were free. We see the resurrection very early, even before the sun came up on Sunday morning. Jesus was out of the grave. In darkness, God does some of his best work. Let's look at Isaiah again, verse 2. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. So this is what I want you to realize and to know, and the title of this is When the Night Feels Long. And this is what we're trying to be able to understand, that this light is actually promised before the light is seen. Right? So light is promised. So the prophet's saying, there will be light. You who live in darkness currently, in your current state, you're living in some darkness right now, and you're trying to be able to say, what am I going to do in the darkness? I can't see, I can't do, or I can't move around, I can't do the things that I want to do. And the prophet's saying, no, there will be light. It will come. And that's the part that we want to be able to grab a hold of, that hope. Because darkness can consume us. Darkness can lead us to be able to give up hope. If we don't hear the words of the prophet to be able to say the light is coming, the light is promised, we don't want to exist there forever. But this is what I want you to also see. The prophet saying that God is going to be the one who's going to bring the light. So God is the one who initiates it. We don't have to try to fix our own darkness. We don't have to be able to say, I am the one who's going to be in charge of finding my way out of the dark and find some way to get to the light. God's saying he's the one who's going to bring the light. He wants you to be able to know that. Why? Because if we're trying to be able to fight our way through the dark, there's going to be some pain attached. I think every year I talk about, like when we talk about light and darkness and kind of existing in the darkness, there's that part. If you ever have children and they leave their toys on the ground overnight, like my children did, and then you're trying to be able to make your way out. If your wife might say, I need a glass of water, and you're like, but it's dark out there, I don't really want to go and get water, right? And then you go fumbling through the darkness, because I never like to turn on a light, because then it makes my eyes adjust, and then I have to go back to like darkness again, and it doesn't work. So I like to just stay in the dark. But here's the thing, when you're trying to make your way through the darkness, you step on things and it hurts. This is the same thing when we're kind of going through the darkness. If we're trying to say, like, I'm alone in this, and there's going to be some pain. And there might be things that are actually going to hurt. And if we felt like that darkness was going to be the only thing that existed around us, of course we would give up hope. We can't try to be able to do it on our own. So hope is this: trusting that the dawn will come, even when the only thing you see is darkness. And that's really the point of this whole Advent series, is that the Advent faith is an expectation that the light will dawn, that the light will appear. And if we talk about that in the same way, when we talk about hope, when we talk about expectations, when we talk about that and that faith and hope linkage together, this is the reason why faith and hope are two pillars of Advent. And oftentimes when we link them together, we have faith, we have hope. And it is an expectation that God says that I'm going to both, one, exist in the dark, and two, help you to be able to see that light is coming. So if nothing else, throughout the whole series, this is what I want you to be able to understand, that all through this whole season is all about the faith to expect. The hope to be able to trust that God is going to lead us through the darkness to light. All right, let's go to the New Testament now. Let's go to Romans. And in Romans chapter 13, we're going to see some of this same language. All right, the same language that we've heard Isaiah use like 700 years before. We're going to hear Paul use some of these same words. So 13, and we're going to go to 11 and 12. This is all the more urgent for you to know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of light, of right living. So as I mentioned, Paul's using this Advent language that Isaiah was talking about 700 years before. He talked about this progression of the way that we see God move. He's saying there is currently night, and that night's going to end. See, we don't even think about that anymore, right? When we think about when I go to sleep, it is night, and what I'm going to wake up is the morning. And you're like, I already instinctually, your body already knows it. There's an internal clock within the way that God has built us and put us together, that there's something in us that already knows that, and somehow, even though we're built that way, we don't always think that God's going to bring about the dawn. But God works in the night, and this is what Paul's saying. The night is ending. The dawn is coming. And that leads to the day when there will be light. But here's the thing about God's progression is that currently, I think we live in what's called the almost dawn. It's like the now, but not yet. And this is when we look at the difference kind of between like the Isaiah speaking to a people that did not yet know the Messiah had come, right? And us who Jesus has already come, and now we await his return. That kind of difference leads us to be able to say it's almost come. There's a now, yes, the light has come. We know that Jesus is here. But we also wait because there's still darkness. We wait for Jesus to come back again to see our faith fully realized when we look Jesus in the face. So almost dawn is the way that we put this right now because we await for that second. But Paul says this, he says, wake up, pay attention, live alert, don't drift. Right? This is very clear instructions for us to be able to say this is what Paul is telling us because he's also was telling the people in the church of that day. He's saying there is a time, right? And so what do? In darkness, it's easy for us to be able to drift off, to go to sleep. But in our faith, Jesus doesn't want us to be having a sleepy faith. And so when we say wake up, when we say start paying attention to the things that are happening around us, this leads us not to be able to just drift off. We live differently because we know that morning is coming. And I mentioned this before. I'll just reinforce it again. We in our bodies know that all of a sudden when we go to sleep, the next morning is going to come. We know that we're asleep in darkness, but we will arise to light. And so when we know that the light is coming as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we know that the light is coming. And so it allows us to be able to live differently. To say I'm not going to get stuck in that same kind of like, oh, nothing's going to happen, is we're only going to live in the light or in the darkness, and the darkness is consuming us, and the darkness is bringing us down, and that's really easy for us to do. But as Christians, we're saying we follow Jesus. Jesus is the light. Jesus is never gone. Jesus is never far, and so therefore, we live differently. The darkness that's trying to consume us won't work. We live in the light. We live knowing that the sun's going to come up. And those are the things that lead us to be able to say, God, we're going to be able to share that hope with others as well. So let's continue. Verse 12. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of right living. Because we belong to the day, we must live decent lives for all to see. Don't participate in the darkness of wild parties, drunkenness, sexual promiscuity, and immoral living. Instead, clothe yourselves with the presence of the Lord Jesus. Don't let yourselves think about ways to indulge your evil desires. So darkness wants to take a hold of us. Paul's trying to be able to warn us of the things that try to take hold of us, that try to take a hold of our heart, because that's the thing right now that still clings to the hope of the dawn coming, the sun coming up. So darkness is saying it wants us to stay in the dark. It wants us to stay in that way because then we also aren't going to hope or expect for anything else to change or do anything differently. And so we try to manage it instead of surrendering it. So we try to manage the darkness. We try to tell the darkness what to do. We try to say, no, this is not the way that it's supposed to be, right? And when we try to manage it, we usually keep a lot of things still in the dark. So we keep a lot of our secret sins in the dark because then we believe nobody's going to know it, nobody's going to be able to see it, and that's where we can keep it, right? We even sometimes put a nice throw rug over those secret sins to be able to say, no, this is a way to also keep it in the dark. You see, we manage our way through it because then we don't have to see it. We don't have to think it's there. We can say, no, I'm living in the light, when obviously we're not. And if we try to manage our way out of it, it's never going to work. And so what do we need to do? We need to say, God, I got some darkness that's surrounding me. And I want to surrender this darkness over because I can't manage it. I'm not doing well with it. And so when we come to God with it, when we say, God, this is where I'm struggling, this is where the darkness is trying to consume me, God's like, all right, I'm going to meet you right there in the dark. We're going to navigate our way out. And God's going to be able to lead us on that path. So we're called to the light. Why are we called to the light? Because the light does this, and there's a number of metaphors throughout Scripture, but in this it says the light heals. Right? So the light comes in, and that's where those things that were once hidden are now revealed. And if they're revealed, then we can say, God, this has been surrendered to you. This is yours. I repent. I believe in the good news that you have forgiven me. Right? There's that light that comes through that says, I didn't like it, It wasn't good for me, and now I don't have it anymore. God, you've taken it. And there's a healing that happens because it's been revealed. And in that revelation, we start to be able to see God trying to transform our lives as we are leaving behind the mess, the darkness, and we're trying to be able to live into the light of Christ. And so I always hear Paul likes to be able to say, take off things, right? He says, so take off all of those dirty deeds, right? Take off all of those, things that you've been piling on yourself. He's like, take that off. But he never, anytime that Paul's ever talked about it, and he uses this quite a bit throughout his letters, anytime he says take something off, he's not just saying, and now just live naked. No. He's saying take it off, but what does he say? Verse 14, instead now, clothe yourself with Christ's presence. So you notice, God's not just saying take everything off, like or strip down, right? Do this whole thing within and then not do anything else. He's saying, yeah, take it off, right? Because I'm going to take it from you. You've repented, you're forgiven, you're set free, and now do this. Put on, clothe yourself with the identity that's going to bring healing. It's going to bring transformation and protection. And so when we start to be able to take on a new identity, then we start to be able to say, God, I see the light is coming. And this darkness that's trying to consume me won't defeat me. Jesus, the light of the world, also calls you the light. And so when we walk into the light, we don't walk into the light because we're perfect, but we walk into the light because Christ is present there. And when we see and we're surrounded with the presence of Christ, then we even more so know that the darkness is never going to defeat us. Because in John chapter 1, it says that the darkness never could defeat Jesus. We are surrounded by the light, even while we see darkness. So today, hold on. Morning is coming. The light will dawn. In Jesus' name. Please stand and pray with me.